Dear students, viewers, and the subscribers, welcome to the IAS Mentor. This would be lecture number 108 in the series Indian Polity. In the previous lecture, I have started a new topic, that is the constitutional bodies. And as a part of the constitutional body, I have discussed about the Election Commission of India. Today in this lecture, I am going to talk about another constitutional body, that is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, who is also called as the CAG. The Comptroller and Auditor General is established under Article 148 of the Constitution. In the previous class, I have categorically said what is a constitutional body. Any body which is established directly by the Constitution is a constitutional body. And similarly, if you see, the CAG under the Constitution of India is also established directly by virtue of Article 148 of the Constitution. So, as we will proceed in this particular lecture, we will try to understand as to what are the functions that the CAG is supposed to perform under the Constitution, and what are the various powers and authorities as to given by the Constitution to the office of the CAG. And in fact, the position of the CAG is also very important in our constitutional system. In fact, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, during the discussions in the Constituent Assembly, said the office of the CAG is as important as that of the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court of India ensures the justice to the people of this country, whereas the Comptroller and Auditor General is supposed to ensure the financial accountability of the government. And that is, in fact, for this reason, the Comptroller and Auditor General is also considered to be the guardian of public purse. The government collects the taxes, uses these taxes. But whether the government is using the money that is collecting from the people, be it tax money or the other resources that they mobilize, are they using it as per the rules? Are they using it properly? Or is they being spent at their discretion? Is it being misutilized? We need to have a certain element of auditing of all these things. So, who is going to do all these audit? It is a CAG who is going to audit all those things under the Constitution of India, and that is why the CAG is also considered to be a guardian of public purse. The CAG is not only described as the guardian of public purse, the CAG is also a friend, philosopher and guide to the Public Accounts Committee in the Parliament. Because as we will proceed, we will try to understand the functions of the CAG. At that time, you will understand that once the CAG audits the accounts of the government, the CAG is going to submit this particular report to the Public Accounts Committee in the Parliament, whereas the Public Accounts Committee is going to scrutinize all those things. And in case if the Public Accounts Committee is not able to understand any of these reports, then the CAG will help them in understanding all those things. That is why the CAG is also considered to be a friend, philosopher and guide to the Public Accounts Committee. So, this is just an introduction. So, as we will proceed, we will try to understand as to what is the constitutional position of the CAG, what are the powers that he exercises under the Constitution, what are the functions he is supposed to perform, are there any criticism with regard to the office of the CAG. We will try to understand all those things one by one as we will proceed in this particular lecture. But before I proceed to the constitutional provisions, as it is given in Article 148 and some of the other provisions in the Constitution, the first thing that I wanted to ask, what is this name Comptroller and Auditor General? In fact, it is a colonial legacy. In the British parliamentary system, there is an officer who is called as a CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General. The British ruled India over 200 years. So, therefore, we also have this particular provision who is called as a CAG. Once India became independent, when the Constitution was drafted, we also have an officer today who is called as a CAG. But is the CAG in India and the CAG in United Kingdom, are they comparable in nature? They are not comparable in nature. While in case of India, he is merely an Auditor General. He is not a Comptroller and Auditor General. He is merely an Auditor General. So, he has the authority only to audit the accounts. He does not have any permission to authorize the withdrawal of money from the Consolidated Fund of India. So, Comptroller is someone who also gives permission before taking out the money from the Consolidated Fund of the respective countries. But whereas in India, the CAG is not associated with giving permission to withdraw the money, the CAG only audits after the expenditure. And the CAG also sees all the revenue transaction, audits all the revenue transactions as well. So that's basically what is done by the CAG. So therefore, his function is limited only as an auditor general, not as a comptroller and auditor general. But still, as per the colonial legacy, we consider him to be what is called as the comptroller and auditor general of India. So let us try to understand first the constitutional provisions related to the CAG, and then subsequently we'll try to understand as to what are the functions that the CAG has to perform under the constitution and as per the laws in our country. Now, before we understand the function of the CAG, we have to understand who appoints the CAG in our country. The CAG is appointed by the President of India. So, who is supposed to appoint the CAG? It is the President who has to appoint the CAG, and most importantly, the CAG under the Constitution is appointed by a warrant under his hand and seal. So, what does it mean by a warrant under his hand and seal? It is not that everywhere or wherever the President is appointing authority, the Constitution specifies by a warrant under his hand and seal. But when it comes to appointment of the CAG, it specifically mentions by a warrant under his hand and seal. To certain other constitutional authorities also, it specifies by a warrant under his hand and seal. So, for example, the appointment of the Supreme Court judges, there also it is mentioned by a warrant under his hand and seal. The appointment of governor by a warrant under his hand and seal. So, what does it mean by a warrant under his hand and seal? Now, these are appointments which has to be done by the President of India himself. The appointment letter should bear the signature and the office seal of the President of India. He cannot delegate this authority to any of the other subordinates. Now, what understanding you should have is, say for example, even with regard to the appointment of the All India Services, or for that matter the Central Civil Services, which is basically the officers who are recruited by the examination that is conducted by the Union Public Service Commission. Now, in this case also the President is the appointing authority, but it is not saying by a warrant under his hand and seal, which means in this case, although the President is the appointing authority, the President can delegate this power to some of the other authorities. But that is not possible when it comes to appointment of the Comptroller and Auditor General. So, who appoints the Comptroller and Auditor General? As per Article 148 of the Constitution, the President is the one who is to appoint, and they are all appointed by a warrant under his hand and seal. And most importantly, the CAG can also be removed from the position, but if at all the CAG is to be removed from the position, the CAG can be removed only in the same manner as that of a judge of a Supreme Court. We have already seen as to how a judge of a Supreme Court can be removed. A judge of a Supreme Court can be removed either on the grounds of proved misbehavior or incapacity. On these charges, a motion has to be introduced in the Parliament, that is in any house of the Parliament, and this motion has to be passed with special majority in both the houses of the Parliament, that is both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and all these things has to happen in the same session, and then subsequently it goes to the President, and the President gives an assent to this, approval to this. Then only the Supreme Court judges can be removed. And if at all the CAG is to be removed, the CAG can be removed only in the same manner. So therefore, this position or this provision in the Constitution gives a high level of independence to the office of the CAG. Because later we'll understand why the independence is very important to the CAG, because the CAG has to audit the government accounts, both the revenue as well as the expenditure accounts. So therefore, he should be really independent in terms of his functioning, and that is when he can exactly achieve the objectives of the Constituent Assembly, that being a guardian of the public purse. So therefore, in the way that he functions, he nearly need to have an independence, and in order to provide this independence, his removal has been made extremely difficult. Apart from that, what the Constitution says, whenever somebody is appointed as a Comptroller and Auditor General, they need to be administered an oath. So oath has to be administered to them, and who is supposed to administer this oath? This oath is to be administered by the President of India. So the President will administer this oath, and the oath is to be administered as it is mentioned in the third schedule of the Constitution. If you go to the third schedule of the Constitution, it talks about the oath that shall be administered to certain categories of people, certain constitutional dignitaries. So accordingly, who will administer this oath? It is the President who is going to administer this particular oath to the Comptroller and Auditor General. And the CAG is also eligible to get certain salary and certain other service conditions. Now all those things are to be determined by an Act of Parliament. Accordingly, The Comptroller and Auditor General Appointment and Conditions of Service Act 1971 has been passed. So that will specify as to what is the salary, allowances and other service conditions, and including his duties and responsibilities are also mentioned in such an act. We will discuss about that as we will go there. All right. But one condition that is given in the Constitution is, the Constitution explicitly says that the service condition of the CAG shall not be varied to his disadvantage. So what does it mean that the service condition shall not be varied to his disadvantage? It means that whatever be his salary, be his allowances, be his pension rules, be his leave rules, nothing can be varied to his disadvantage after he is appointed. Now once he is appointed, whatever is the service condition, that should remain a status quo, or it can be varied to his advantage but not to his disadvantage. So this again ensures the independence of the CAG, the way the CAG can perform his duties, and this independence is very important for the CAG to perform his duties effectively. And apart from that, the Constitution also says that whatever is the salary, allowances and the expenditures of the office of the CAG, now all those things shall be charged upon the Consolidated Fund of India. So that's very important. When you say all these expenditures to be charged upon the Consolidated Fund of India, I have categorically explained that the expenditure which is coming from the Consolidated Fund of India can be classified into two types. They are classified into either made expenditure. All the expenditure, how they are classified? They are classified either into made expenditure or they are classified into charged expenditure. So what is the difference between made expenditure and charged expenditure, and which expenditure is considered to be an important expenditure? Generally, the charged expenditures are considered to be so important that these expenditures may be discussed during the vote on demand for grant stage in the budgetary process, but they are not put to vote. But what about the made expenditure? The made expenditures are discussed during the vote on demand for grant stage, and they can also be put to vote. So once they are put to vote, they can be altered, varied, but that will not happen in case of what is called as a charge expenditure. For the students to have a better understanding, you please go and watch my budgetary chapter. So in the budgetary chapter, as to how the budget is enacted, I have detailedly talked about all those things. That is why I continuously keep telling the students, if you are following this series for your own benefit and for the maximum benefit, try to follow this series in a chronological order. And if you follow it in a chronological order, it is going to be extremely useful. All right. Now coming back to the Comptroller and Auditor General, so there are certain element of independence that has been given to the CAG. How? First of all, his removal is extremely difficult. He can be removed in the same manner as that of the judge of the Supreme Court. Second is all his salaries, allowances, expenditure, they are all charged upon the Consolidated Fund of India. That means they are considered to be so important. Even the Parliament does not have the power to reduce them. Now third is a service condition cannot be varied to his disadvantage. So therefore, he can ensure the independence in the way that he functions. Now these are all the questions that you can expect even in the mains examination. In fact, once UPSC is asked the powers and functions, and to what extent do you think that the Constitution guarantees the independence of the CAG? So try to remember all those things. But what is very important when you discuss about the CAG is what is the power and functions of the CAG, what the CAG is supposed to do under the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution elaborately does not give the functions that the CAG is supposed to perform. Article 148 of the Constitution establishes the office of the CAG. But what are the functions they are supposed to perform is largely to be defined based on the law that is made by the Parliament. Accordingly, the Parliament has enacted the CAG Duties, Powers and Conditions of Service Act 1971, and which majorly talks about what are the functions that are to be functioned by or performed by the Comptroller and Auditor General. So what is the primary function that is to be performed by the CAG under the Constitution of India? The primary function that is to be performed by the CAG is that he is to audit all the receipt as well as the expenditures of the Union government. All accounts related to the receipt and all accounts related to the expenditure of the Government of India. So what does it mean by all accounts related to receipts and all accounts related to what is called as expenditure? Receipts basically means, let us assume it is an income to the government. So for example, the government collects the taxes, so therefore a lot of tax is collected. And they maintain a separate account of how much revenue has been collected. That is basically what is called as receipt. An expenditure account basically means whatever expenses it is done by the government in the way of paying salaries to the government employees, in the way of spending money for the welfare schemes, in the way of spending money for the developmental activities. These are all expenditures. So each and every transaction of receipts and each and every transaction of expenditure is to be maintained by the government departments. And what the CAG will do is the CAG will audit all these accounts. And before auditing all these accounts has to be compiled in a way which is easier for the CAG to audit it. So I'll just come back to that particular area. So one primary function that will be done by the CAG is that they will receipt all the receipts, they will audit all the receipts and the expenditure accounts of the government. Now before the CAG audit all these accounts, they have to be compiled. That means they have to be consolidated and then the CAG will do the audit at the end of the year, which will be done by the CAG. So therefore, it is also their responsibility to what is called as compile the accounts of the center and the states. Okay, one more important thing that I should add to the previous point. The CAG not only audits all the revenue and the expenditure accounts of the government of India, but the CAG also adds the revenue and the expenditure account of the states as well. For all the state government also, their revenue and the expenditure accounts will be audited by whom? It will be done by the CAG of India. Now, after this audit, what they will do, I'll just discuss it. But before that, I said that these accounts has to be compiled. Now, before 1974, before this year, now all the compilation was done basically by what is called as the Comptroller and Auditor General. But presently, the compilation is only done for whom? The compilation is only done for the states. So, the CAG is compiling the accounts only for the states. And for the center, there's a separate authority who is called as the Controller General of Accounts. So it is a Controller General of Accounts is one who is going to audit the, is the one who will compile the accounts presently. And now try to remember, it is only for the states it is done by the CAG, and for the center it is done by the Controller General of Accounts. All right. So this is basically what you'll have to understand. So presently this is the case. So compilation is done by the CAG for the states and auditing is also done by for the states by the CAG. In case of center, compiling of accounts is done by the Controller General of Accounts, auditing is done by what is called as the CAG. So this is basically what you'll have to understand. Now further, the most important thing is, okay, after the compilation is done, they are going to audit the receipts and the expenditure. Receipt, they will see that whatever tax is collected, it is reflecting in the government accounts. Whatever expenditure that is done by the CAG, it is reflecting in the government accounts. Now the CAG, when they are doing the audit, the CAG will do different types of audit. So one is basically what is called as that they will see whether the money has been spent as it has been approved. So this is not the only audit that is done by the CAG. So this is basically what is called as a financial audit. Now financial audit means where the CAG is going to see whether the expenditure and the revenue are matching each other. If 100 rupees is collected by the center and if 80 rupees are spent, do they have 20 rupees in balance? So they will just verify these things. Or if suppose let us assume 100 rupees is collected and 50 rupees is borrowed and 150 rupees is spent by the government, is all these things are tallying one another. So this is basically what is called as a financial audit. But the CAG does not stop only with what is called as financial audit. Presently they do what is called as audit of performance as well. So this is in fact one of the important functions that is done by the CAG. Now what is this audit of performance? Audit of performance means whether the money that is spent by the government has produced a desired result. Whether the money that has been spent by the government is really useful or it is not useful. Whether the money could have been spent effectively by the government or not. Whatever schemes that they invest, whatever developmental projects that they spend, is it good enough to provide returns to the people so that the money is not the money is not wasted for any purpose. So this is basically what is called as a performance audit. Although the element of performance audit which is done by the CAG has some element of criticism, but still the CAG is allowed to perform what is called as a performance audit. So they do carry financial audit, they do carry what is called as performance audit. So after they have done the audit of all these things, they consolidate all the reports, and what they do, they submit this report to the President of India. To whom the CAG has to submit the report? The CAG will submit the report to the President of India, and the president in turn will submit the report to the parliament. So this is in case of the union. But I have also said that the CAG audits the receipts and the expenditure of the accounts of the states as well. So in case of states, the CAG will submit the report to the governor of the concerned state, and the governor will submit the report to the concerned state legislature. So this is normally happens. Now in the parliament, what will happen is, why the president is submitting the report to the parliament. In the parliament, this report will be elaborately studied by a committee which is called as the Public Accounts Committee, PAC. I already discussed about the Public Accounts Committee. So this has got 22 members, 15 from Lok Sabha, 7 from Rajya Sabha, and they study this particular report. And if there is anything adverse report or adverse remark that is made by the CAG in the report, then the Public Accounts Committee can question the government on these areas. The Public Accounts Committee scrutinizes all these reports, and they can question any lapses in terms of expenditure, any misutilization of fund by the government. So all these things will be questioned by the Public Accounts Committee, and the Public Accounts Committee can bring it to the notice of the Parliament also. And that is the reason that you can understand that as per the conventional practices today in our country, the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee in the Parliament is only from the opposition party and not from the ruling party. Now why the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee is from the opposition party? So therefore he can ensure the accountability of the government. So you can understand the way that the CAG function is there and the way the Public Accounts Committee performs. They all ensure what is called as a financial accountability of the government. In fact, one of the important function of the parliament is to ensure the financial accountability of the government. But to perform this particular duty, the CAG plays a very, very important role, because the CAG is a specialist and the CAG is someone who audits account and presents it in front of the parliament. So the parliament has a material to question the government. So this is the way that the CAG can help the parliament in discharging their duties and responsibilities, ensuring what is called as the financial accountability of the government. And it is for this particular reason Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, as I already said, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar considered the CAG to be the guardian of public purse. I said he is not only the guardian of public purse, but he is also a friend, philosopher and guide to the Public Accounts Committee. Because when the Public Accounts Committee is scrutinizing the report in the parliament, if they have any doubts and if they have any problem in understanding the report, because the report is very technical in nature. So if they have any problem in understanding these reports, they can ask, they can call upon the CAG and they can seek a help in understanding all those things. So therefore he is also considered to be a friend, philosopher and guide to the Public Accounts Committee. But this is not where the function of the CAG ends. The CAG is someone who also audit the various transactions which is carried out by the public sector undertaking in our country, both the central public sector undertaking as well as the state public sector undertaking. So public sector undertaking are nothing but commercial companies, but these are all companies which are all owned by the government, or at least the government is a major stakeholder. So the CAG is also an external auditor of all these companies, and the CAG will submit a report with regard to this also to the President of India when it comes to central public sector undertaking. And the CAG will submit a similar report to the governor of each and every state with regard to the state public sector undertaking. And the President in turn will submit this report to the Parliament. And in the Parliament, these reports are scrutinized by the Committee on Public Sector Undertaking. And the Committee on Public Sector Undertaking may raise the questions to the government. So therefore, overall, the main objective of the CAG is to ensure the financial accountability of the government. So therefore, they audit the reports and submit it in front of the President of India, and subsequently the President will submit the report to the Parliament. And this is the reason that the CAG is considered to be very, very influential in our country. But however, the office of the CAG is also not beyond any criticism. And there's a lot of reforms that has been pending with regard to the office of the CAG as well. So what are the reforms that has been, if it is brought in, can improve upon the function of the CAG? Now try to understand, the CAG is not a multi-member body. There is only one person who is appointed as a Comptroller and Auditor General. There can be hundreds of people in the office of the CAG who help the CAG, but ultimately there is only one person who is a Comptroller and Auditor General, which is unlike the Election Commission of India, which is a multi-member body. So therefore, the power is centralized when it comes to CAG. And usually a person of highest integrity is appointed as a CAG. But what in case if the person is not having integrity? So it can have a serious implication upon the constitutional responsibilities of the CAG. That is why a lot of criticism is there with regard to a single member body, and various experts have suggested that the CAG should be made a multi-member body as that of the Election Commission of India, and in case of differences of opinion, the decision will be taken by what is called as a majority vote, as in the case of the Election Commission of India. So this is one criticism related to the CAG and what kind of reform can be brought in. Second is, if you look into the Election Commission of India, today the members of the Election Commission of India and the chairperson of the Election Commission of India, they are all appointed by a select committee. They are not unilaterally appointed by the government or by the president based on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. But even today with regard to the CAG, who appoints the CAG? It is the President of India on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. But the very person who is appointed as a CAG, he should do what? He should audit the government accounts. And in fact, if there is any extravagance in terms of expenditure, misutilization of finances or corruption, it is a CAG who has to bring it in the notice, or it is a CAG who has to report all those things in the report. So the very purpose of the CAG is to find fault with the government. But the government is making this appointment. So there could be a possibility of conflict of interest in the way that the CAG is appointed. So therefore, the CAG shall not be appointed on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, but the CAG shall be appointed by a specific select committee, an independent body. So that is what the criticism is saying. So this is again one of the areas of reforms. And then the next thing is simplification of the language of the audit report. Because ultimately the CAG is merely the CAG has no authority to take any action. The CAG, after their audit, if they find out the corruption or misutilization of money, they can only just record it. The CAG has no permission to take any action against any authority. But the CAG brings this report in front of the parliamentarians. Well, the parliamentarians can ask questions and therefore ensure accountability of the government. But however, the biggest problem today is the members of parliament in our country may not be experts in the areas of accounts, and there is no need for that also in a democracy. But however, for them to understand this report becomes very important so that they can effectively ask questions to the government. So it is very important that the reports which is prepared by the CAG is simplified, which could be understood, which could be easily understandable by the members of the parliament. So therefore, they can make the executives accountable to the legislature or the government accountable to the parliament. So these are all some of the areas of reforms. Maybe you can write it as a part of your conclusion in the mains answer writing. When you write the answers for the mains examination. And the other provisions that I have discussed is also very important for the prelims examination. So now coming to the conclusion. So what is the major function of the CAG is to audit the government transactions, audit the PSUs and submit the report to the president and the governors respectively, which will be finally scrutinized by them. So it is a tool to ensure the accountability of the government to the legislature. That's a major work that is done by the CAG. Apart from that, if you look into the constitutional provisions, who appoints the CAG? It is the president who has to appoint the CAG, and the president appoints them by a warrant under the hand and seal. And there are certain provisions in the constitution which does ensure the independence of the CAG. So these are all some of the provisions that you'll have to keep in your mind. So with that, we are coming to the end of the lecture related to the Comptroller and Auditor General. But our lecture never ends without discussing the question. So please come to the question. Which one of the following is not performed by the Comptroller and Auditor General? Audit and report of the expenditure of the Consolidated Fund of India. Most of the expenditure of the government comes from the Consolidated Fund of India. The audit and reports of expenditure from the Contingency Fund and public accounts. The government may take money from these funds also. So whatever is expenditure of the government, that is audited by the CAG. The audit and report of all trading, manufacturing, profit and loss accounts of the government enterprises, PSUs. To control the receipt and issue of public money and to ensure the public revenue is lodged in the expenditure. So this is meaning, does the CAG have any control with regard to how many money is coming in and whether the money is coming in, and whenever the money is withdrawn from these public accounts or from any of the other accounts, does it require the permission of the CAG? So that is what option D is talking about. So if you have carefully listened to my lecture, I am quite sure that you can easily answer this particular question. So try to say which one of the following is not a function that is performed by the CAG. I am sure that you can find out the answer. Please put the answers in the comment box. So with that, I am coming to the end of this particular lecture. We are still a few more lectures before we could complete the series, and I'm very sure that the series is going to help lakhs and lakhs of students preparing for the UPSC exam as well as the other competitive examinations like the state service examination. If you have any queries related to any of the topic or related to the preparation of the examination, you can reach out to me through my Instagram account or through my Telegram account. Thank you very much for watching this particular lecture, and if you like this lecture, please share it with others which may help them in their preparation. And if you have any concerns related to the examination, please reach out to me. Do not have any concerns. You can think me as your friend, guide or a mentor who can help you in clearing the examination. Thank you very much and all the very best.